Nighttime on still waters. This is NB 506812, narrowcasting into the night from somewhere on Britain's waterways. First of August, Friday, Lammas Day. Feels the colour of linen and calico under turbulent skies of heavy cloud. As I chew on a blade of grass, the wind whips up dust devils across the dry, hard-baked hill. Apples fall, half ripened. Harry the goat stands on his hind legs, sniffs the air, nostrils flaring. Lammas Day, the first fruits of harvest home. The moon, just past its first quarter, is sinking in the west, as we slip from nautical to astronomical twilight. Bat-wise by owl light, as Dylan Thomas almost said. This is a night for dreaming wild. A westerly wind blows thistledown across the canal, silvery and fey. Starlight above, stardust below. And this is the narrowboat Erica, narrowcasting to you into the deepening twilight of an August night, to you, wherever you are. It's great to see you, and I'm so glad you managed to come. The forecasts promise heavy weather ahead, but we'll be fine tonight. So take it easy, and why not come inside and make yourself comfortable? The kettle is on the boil, the biscuit barrel is to hand. Welcome aboard. I love at eventide to walk alone down narrow lanes o'erhung with dewy thorn, where from the long grass underneath the snail jet black creeps out and sprouts his timid horn. I love to muse o'er meadows newly mown, where withering grass perfumes the sultry air, where bees search round with sad and weary drone in vain for flowers that bloomed but newly there, while in the juicy corn the hidden quail cries, "Wet my foot!" and hid as thoughts unborn. The fairy-like and seldom seen landrail utters, "Crake, crake!" like voices underground, right glad to meet the evening's dewy veil, and see the light fade into glooms around. John Clare's Summer Moods sums up perfectly this time of the season. That brief and gentle pause before the energetic activity of harvest time. Lammas, the festival of first fruits of the coming harvest, has just passed, and there's a shaking awake, as of an old farm dog rousing from sleep in the yard in the slanting rays of an afternoon sun. But for the last couple of weeks, a short hiatus, a holiday of sorts. That almost somnambulant languorousness that Clare captures so well. Swallows sweep and turn, dipping beak high above the canal surface, chattering like chimps, but below them, the earth dreams in the dappled dance of sunshine and shadow. Crops ripen. Fruit continues to grow and swell, blushing with new colours. And along the towpath, sloes cluster on thorny vines, misty globes of midnight. Rose hips are just beginning to redden. and lords and ladies, Cuckoo piped, break out in their regimental scarlet coats. The new teasel heads are gathering their soft lilac haze. Ready, almost ready, for harvest, but not quite. And the August moon is in the first quarter, and the river of summer slips by. Lammas has come and gone. The harvest is upon us. And around, among the tall brittle stalks of dried grass and reeds, the canvas, calico and linen tones, an abundance of colour, bright, unabashed and confident. Mallows, morning glories, loosestrife, purple and yellow, balsam, herb, robert, clover, bagpiping thistle, ragwort, coltsfoot, watermint, avens, betony, willow herb, traveller's joy, red shank, knapweed, vetch, tansy. I could go on. And these are only some of those found within 5 to 10 minute walk from our stern hatch door. August weeds, too common for most to see, overlooked, cast along the byways and towpaths without purpose or use, although of course you and I know different. I love Lawrence Binion's poem, August Weeds, that celebrates them so wonderfully. August Weeds. I wandered between woods on a grassy down, when still clouds hung after rain over hollow and hill. The blossom time was over, the singing throats dumb, and the year's coloured ripeness not yet come. And all at unawares, surprising that stray sight, ran straight into my heart like a beam delight. Negligent weeds ravelled the green edge of the copse, whitely, dimly sparkling with a million drops, and sudden fancy feigned what strange beauty would pass, did but a shiver of wind tremble through the grass. Shaking the poised round crops, spilled and softly rolled, a glitter from the ragwort's roughened gold. From the rusted scarlet of tall sorrel seed, and fretted tufts frost-grey of the silver weed, and from the purple down thistle, towering dewy over, yellow-cupped spurge and the drenched sweet clover. But all were motionless, not one breath shed, those little pale pearls that an elf might thread, under a fading moon, by an old thorn tree, for the witching throat of Nimue. Thank you for all your comments and messages. It's always lovely hearing from you. And greetings and hello to Anna. Anna, I hope the situation concerning the extremely low water levels that you're encountering is beginning to sort itself out. As you know, we've obviously also been affected, but it doesn't seem like anything as bad over here as it is with you. So I'm hoping that you're still remaining afloat. And greetings also to Captain Arlo, who in some sense has been suffering the exact opposite to us in the UK and has been hit in his locality with flash flooding. I hope you're okay, Captain. And also to Jason Pali, who I saw from one of your posts, Jason, some pretty hot temperatures were being forecasted, and I hope all is okay with you and Karen. And it was also great to hear from Lee, who was over here in the UK a couple of weeks ago, and she wrote to tell me about a time on the Union and the Forth Clyde canals in Scotland, including the amazing Falkirk Wheel. From what I've seen of them, Lee, yes, the Scottish canals look absolutely stunning. And I'm so pleased that you had a wonderful time and that the weather was kind to you. And on a separate note, Lee sent me some more video footage of her neighbourhood bear that's been visiting her yard. And she said that she thought it might be getting heavier. Lee, do you know if it's female or not? Might she be pregnant? And from the other side of the globe, hello and thank you to Life with Capri for your comments on my canal side plant series that over the year I've been posting on Blue Sky and also on Facebook and Instagram at rather irregular intervals. The idea has been not to try to find anything particularly remarkable or uncommon, but just record and celebrate the diversity of plant life that thrives alongside us, whether that be the dandelion or plantain or something more exotic. And I'm really pleased that you've been enjoying the series and have been introduced to some UK plants. And also from Australia, I received a lovely email from one of our lock-wheelers, Tania Yorgey. Tania lives with her dog Taki in her van, which she uses to travel all over Australia. And she wrote, in response to a couple of recent episodes, and recounted a really lovely experience that she had recently. And she wrote, "Your last 2 podcasts have made me feel more connected to the whole than I have been in a while. I was crossing the Nullarbor across the bottom of Australia, more than 3,000 kilometres driven, and I could have sworn that you were talking of the land that I was travelling on. And your latest podcast, speaking of the myths and legends, again struck a chord. I am now, along with my travel buddy dog Taki, at the top of Australia in the Kimberley region of Western Australia, another 3,300 kilometres further up the road. And the First Nations people, the Aboriginal stories, are shared at certain stop-off points. When I consciously stop and feel into the land we live on, I can feel the mobs and see their connection to this land, never taking from it, only walking with it. And I'm grateful to see stop-off points where First Nations storyboards are shared. There was a story of the Indigenous connection to the Ellendale pool in Western Australia, where I was visiting. Quoting the board, it read, "The story of how Bimera the serpent created the Greennuff River and came to live here at Ellendale Pool is just one of the many threads of connection that Aboriginal people feel at this lovely place and in the surrounding countryside too." As I read the story, it says, in that cliff face over there is a big cave, and that is where Bimera lives. But he came out of there every now and again, and I think one of the old grandfathers was the last one to see him. He won't show himself to us, but he'll let us know he's there. On a day when there's no wind or anything, you'll see a little ripple on the water. I've seen it. And you'll hear a splash, and that is just telling us, I'm still here, just letting us know. I turned to look up at the cliff, and there was the cave. I felt a chill run through my body and watched the waters ripple. It was a windy day, and I said hello and thank you for your story. I love that. Thank you, Tania. And I'm delighted that those episodes resonated so deeply with you. And actually, your email also struck a real chord with me, as one of the books I'm currently reading is Tyson Yunkaporta's Sand Talk. It's an amazing book, but it's also turning my head inside out. I mean, in a good way. I'd never really fully appreciated quite how different Western thinking is to Indigenous and Aboriginal thinking. But it also means that things are making a little bit more sense now. So thank you. I really appreciated your email. And all that remains for me to say is a great big thank you to all of our lock-wheelers for supporting this podcast. They are Susan Baker, Mind Shambles, Clare Hollingsworth, Kevin B., Fleur and David Mcloughlin, Lois Raphael, Tania Yorgey, Andrea Hansen, Chris Hinds, David Dirom, Chris and Alan on the narrowboat The Land of Green Ginger, Captain Arlo, Rebecca Russell, Alison on the narrowboat Mucker, Derek and Pauline on Silver Fox, Anna V, Orange Cookie, Mary Keane, Tony Rutherford, Arabella Holtzapfel, Rory with MJ and Kayla. I love the mask, Rory. Narrowboat Precious Jet, Linda Reynolds Perkins, Richard Noble, Carol Ferguson, Tracy Thomas, Mark and Tricia Stowe, and Madeline Smith. Thank you. A drift of summer rain skips, silvered light through leaf canopy, in a brush of bulrushes. Piloted by swallows, hirondelle, porpoising in front of our bow over the ring-danced waters. The banks glow with ragwort sunshine, mallow and the sprinkling of campion. The frog-green Jeremy Fisher pads of the shy water lily, their flowers still clasped shut, waiting the sun, demurely dip below the water as we pass them, bobbing back up the moment we've passed. The hot spell broke when we were away off the boat. However, it really only just resulted in mainly an increase of cloud and miserly showers that left the ground that was covered by even the meagerest shelter dry. It was only a week later, once we were back on the boat, and after a few phantom thunderstorms, closed-fisted and dry, that rumbled and roared among a sky of granite and slate, virga, precipitation that fails to touch the earth, that the rains eventually came. And this time, not the mizzle or the inland drech, the soft brush of midge-like raindrops, more shower than mist, but only just. This time, large, fat pearls of rain that slapped the baked earth and shook the lamb's wool clouds of meadowsweet along the bank, casting bubbles onto the water's surface. And even the ducks looked amazed, paddling to the sides where bramble and alder, sedge and reed offer some shelter. Icy drops that shiver on the skin, but the air still remains warm, torpid, thick. It smells like the inside of the hothouses at Kew Gardens, or Mum's greenhouse when she had just watered her jungle forest of tomato plants. And when the sun breaks through, the decks and cabin roofs steam. It coils in spectral cauldron wreaths above the canal and towpath. And it's good to be afloat again. Although for most of the time we were off the boat, there is something slightly off about being in a dry dock. Something that left me feeling fidgety, restless, not at ease. You feel strangely vulnerable. It's not just that there's no slight rocking when you move. Somehow it's different to being locked into ice. It's more existential. Something about being cast into an alien environment, one for which the boat is not really fitted. I think I know why geese sleep on water. In case you missed the last couple of episodes, we had the Erica taken out of the water for blacking. It's a fairly regular job that needs to be done every 2 to 3 years. The job of blacking itself is really simple. The hull is pressure washed. Sometimes, if needed, it can be sandblasted to get to the metal, though in most cases this is not needed. And then, once the hull is clean, 2 or preferably 3 coats of blacking are applied to the hull. Blacking is, as it literally states on the tin, thick black paint. It is bitumen-based and is there to help protect the steel hull of the boat from corrosion. And I've heard because of environmental concerns, the bitumen component has been reduced, which is why the frequency of blacking has changed. When we first moved aboard, we were told it needed to be done every 3 to 4 years, but now it's recommended to be done every 2 to 3. I'm not sure if that's the reason, but it seems a plausible, reasonable explanation. There is an alternative, and that's 2-pack epoxy, and this lasts longer, but is more expensive. And it's one of those things that you pays your money and you takes choice. In the days of the old wooden-hulled working boats, they regularly needed to be caulked too for waterproofing. And oakum, tarred hemp or flax fibres were inserted between the planks to ensure that they were watertight. But fortunately with steel hulls, protecting them is much, much easier. However, it's the fact that you need to take the boat completely out of the water that transforms this relatively easy maintenance job into what feels like a major undertaking. The last time we joined a number of other local boats and had the Erica craned out of the water, it was a bit disruptive and nerve-wracking watching your entire home dangling in the air and then being lifted over a large high hedge. But it was also expensive. But at least it all occurred practically on our doorstep. This year, however, we opted for a dry dock, which meant that we needed to factor in when one became available. There's a lot of boats on the canal, so you need to book a slot well in advance. And we decided on sometime in the summer, when I could be a little bit more flexible work-wise. And we also hoped that the weather would be a bit more conducive for painting. The last blacking took place in spring, again with an eye on the weather, but halfway through we had a really cold snap and ended by putting on the final coat as it began to snow. And the problem was that the crane had already been booked to put us back in the water, and so we couldn't delay it. We just crossed our fingers in the hope that the blacking would properly cure in time in such cold, damp conditions. And it was this type of situation and stress that we hoped to avoid this year, little knowing we'd be encountering a drought and consequently very low water levels, severely affecting the stretches of the canal that we needed to travel through to get to the dry dock. In fact, the day before we left, I quickly checked the CRT notifications when I was at work in my office, only to read that the entire canal that we were actually on had been closed to movement. Fortunately, by the next morning it was open again, although we did have to stop just below a short flight of locks for about 3 or so hours, but at least it was open. And despite being at the mercy of so many different variables, thankfully everything slotted into place. And we even managed to have a lovely couple of days away together in a shepherd's hut in the middle of a wildflower meadow up high in the tranquil and unspoilt beauty of the Shropshire hills. Maggie absolutely adored it. Perhaps more on that in another episode. The dry dock itself was really interesting. We'd never been in one or used one before, although we of course have seen them many, many times. And I'd sort of guessed how they work, but I'd never managed to see one properly in use. And like most things on the canal, they are both staggeringly simple and ingenious at the same time. Dry docks are usually nothing more complicated or elaborate than a short trench that's wide and long enough to accommodate a full-size canal boat that's been cut into the side of the canal. Some, like the ones at Tooley's Yard in Banbury or at Braunston, are covered and can even have lifting gantries and space for workshop machinery. And in look and feel, they are very reminiscent of the old railway engine sheds in the days of steam. However, others are much simpler. maybe having a basic cover, and more recently taking the form of a large polytunnel. However, others, like the one that we used, are simply just a cutting dug out of the canal from which water can be drained. It's beautifully simple and really effective. And using them is simplicity itself. You simply float the boat, either under power or hand-hauled, into the dock. The boat is then positioned over blocks or cross beams that have been laid on the floor of the dock. This ensures that once the water has been drained, the hull remains clear of the ground to offer some access, but also to ensure that the boat is level and not resting on anything that might damage the hull. The entrance to the dock is then sealed by dropping 4 planks of wood that fit rather loosely into, this is really stupid, but I've no idea what to call these things, and the internet has so far been really unhelpful. Runners, notches, or slots that have been cut out of the brickwork. I hope you know what I mean. Well, whatever the proper name is for them, they've been cut into the brickwork on either side of the narrow entrance to the dock. Now, you might be thinking that the loose fit of the planks will rather undermine the whole purpose of keeping water out. There is total method behind this apparent madness. And it's one of those things that I find so fascinating and ingenious. As we will see in a minute, the fact that the planks are only loosely fitted together is crucial to the effectiveness of the entire operation when it comes to refilling the dock. It's one of those really rather breathtakingly counterintuitive but ingenious things. Once the planks have been slotted into place, to make sure that it is as watertight as possible, a heavy-duty tarpaulin weighted with thick chains is then lowered on the canal side. And once the water starts to empty out of the dock, the water pressure on the canal side will force the tarpaulin into place, making it well-nigh watertight. In our case, the dock was drained by the use of a rack and pinion paddle system wound by a windlass, pretty much identical to the ground paddle system that you'll find on most UK locks. Again, when you think about it, this is not surprising, as essentially a dry dock is nothing more than a lock, but with only one entrance, and which goes nowhere. And as the water drains, the boat is held in place over the cross beams by barge poles, one on each side. And the whole thing takes little more than 4 or 5 minutes. Interestingly, although clearly utilising here the technology and expertise of the canal revolution, the concept of dry docks is nothing new. And our earliest reference is from the writing of the late 2nd or early 3rd century Greek grammarian and rhetorician Athenaeus of Naucratis. Now, Athenaeus described the launch of an enormous catamaran named as the Tessaconteres during the reign of Ptolemy IV, which is in the late 2nd century BC. According to one estimate, it would have had 1,000 oarsmen each side and would have carried enough officers and crew to equate with a modern aircraft carrier. If it did actually exist, and there is elements of doubt about it, it's reputed to be the largest human-powered vessel ever to have been built. And about its launch, Athenaeus writes this: "But after that, a Phoenician devised a new method of launching the ship, having dug a trench under it, equal to the ship itself in length, which he dug close to the harbour. And in the trench he built props of solid stone 5 cubits deep, and across them he laid beams crosswise, running the laces whole width of the trench at 4 cubits distance from one another. And then, making a channel from the sea, he filled all the space which he had excavated with water, out of which he easily brought the ship by the aid of whatever men happened to be at hand. Then, closing the entrance, which had been originally made, he drained the water off again by means of engines. And when this had been done, the vessel rested securely on the before-mentioned crossbeams. Controversies aside about whether or not the Tessaraconteres actually existed, Athenaeus' description of the method used mirrors closely the techniques we can still see being used up and down the cut, and which enable the Erica to be black. Infuriatingly, the most interesting element about this process was how the water was drained out of the dock again, and Athenaeus is frustratingly vague, employing the rather unhelpful noun organois, instruments, or possibly in this context, engines. However, in the case of the Erica, it was the refilling of the dock that I found most intriguing and satisfying, and not simply because we were becoming once more afloat. The first stage was the lifting and removal of the tarpaulin and chains, and once this was done, a controlled amount of water began to seep and flow back into the dock. Nothing too violent. In fact, we've been in locks with much leakier gates than that. Then came the task of removing the planks or stopboards. Here is where that detail about the importance behind the apparently ill-fitting stopboards really comes into play. A few kicks of the top plank loosens it enough for the pressure seal to be broken, which allows it to then be relatively easily lifted out. And this began a series of waterfalls as the next plank is lifted out as well, and the water flows over it into the dock. In this way, it wasn't long before the water level within the dock was the same as that of the canal basin to which it was joined. However, this left the problem of the two lower stop planks, which by now were well under the water, and which needed to be removed in order for the Erica to be able to exit the dock. There didn't seem to be any boat hooks or other implements that could hook them out. However, as soon as this second plank had been removed, and the water level within the dry dock was roughly level with the rest of the canal, as if by magic, there was a gush of bubbles at each side of the entrance, and the third plank majestically rose to the surface. And once this was taken out and placed with the others, the final plank rose up too, in its own gush of bubbles. No messing around with boat hooks, no lying down on the ground and scrabbling up to your armpits in water, no fun in winter, I guess, to try to find the pull rings that attach the planks to pull them up. It was genius. As with most things to do with the canal, the water did it all. You just had to work with it and not against it. They knew what they were doing, did those people of old. Rough and homespun it may be, but there's a beauty and a magnificent sense of awe about it too. If you want to see some photographs of this process of filling the dock, and also of the Erica in the dry dock, then I've uploaded some to the NOSW Pod website. And all that leaves me to say is, this is the Narrowboat Erica, signing off for the night and wishing you a very restful and peaceful night. Good night. Temperature outside 14.7 degrees. Inside 22 degrees. Humidity 54%. Dew point 8 degrees. Wind direction west-northwest. Wind strength 9 miles per hour. Barometric pressure 1017.6 falling. Cloud cover 42%. Cloud ceiling 20,000 feet. Precipitation nil. Moon phase 62.9% waxing gibbous. Day length 15 hours 26 minutes. Sunset 2056. Sky casting 5:32.